My arrogant wife allowed her best friend to propose during our wedding. Although I told her no, now she regrets everything because I want a divorce. My wife and I had been planning this wedding for over a year. We agreed on everything except the guest list. I knew my fiancée would choose her friend Julia as maid of honor. Julia can be a bit self-centered at times. When we go out with friends, she always orders the most expensive dish and then insists on splitting the bill evenly, as it's less work. She frequently cancels plans on a whim, even when it disrupts my schedule. Once, I had planned a romantic dinner with my fiancé, but Julia showed up at our house unannounced with drinks, saying she wanted to spend time with her best friend. I tried to say we weren't available, but my fiancé insisted that we reschedule our date for the following week, as Julia was already there. Still, I supported my fiancé's decision to have her as maid of honor because it was her choice, not mine. I thought I could tolerate Julia for one day, for the sake of my future wife, but I was wrong. A few months ago, my fiancé mentioned that Julia wanted to propose to her boyfriend during our wedding reception. I vehemently rejected this idea because that day was supposed to be about us, not her. Of course, I would have been happy to help with her proposal, but doing it at our wedding would steal the attention from the newlyweds. I had heard other stories about this happening and absolutely hated the idea. My fiancé agreed with me and told Julia that she could propose on another occasion, or at least that's what I thought. During the wedding preparations, I was asked several times if she could propose during our reception. Julia argued that it would be the only day they'd both be dressed formally for photos and that she wanted a good memory. Each time, I had to refuse, stating that this day was special to us and I didn't want it ruined. I was surprised by her persistence, especially from my fiancé. I wanted our special day to be perfect, and I explained this to my fiancé for the fourth time, a month before the wedding. That was the last day we spoke about it, and I thought they had finally given up on the idea. On the wedding day, I noticed my now wife and Julia talking secretly a few times, but I ignored it, thinking it was nothing. Everything, including the ceremony, was wonderful until the disappointment. We were sitting watching a slideshow of our beautiful memories and were about to do our couple's dance when Julia suddenly grabbed the microphone and instructed everyone to be quiet. I felt my stomach turn. Something inside me already knew what was about to happen, but I still held out a sliver of hope that it would be something else. Anything but what I feared. The whole room went silent. All eyes turned to her. I, sitting next to my wife, looked at her, hoping she would say or do something to stop this, but what I saw was a nervous, almost complicit smile. My heart raced, and a mix of anger and disappointment filled me. I would like to take this special moment to share something very important, began Julia, in the pretentious tone I knew all too well. My fists clenched automatically. Was she really doing this? She looked at her boyfriend, who was visibly uncomfortable, and began talking about how special he was to her, how much she loved him, while I, sitting at my own wedding, was forced to watch the most pathetic and selfish spectacle I had ever witnessed. My blood boiled with every word that left her mouth. All the attention that should have been on me and my wife was now fixed on her and the absurd show she was putting on. When she finally knelt down and proposed, some people applauded. Others looked as uncomfortable as I felt. I looked at my wife again, hoping she would realize how wrong this was, but all she did was timidly clap, as if justifying her friend's actions. That was the last straw. I stood up and excused myself. I didn't wait for her response, nor did I care what others might think. I walked straight outside, taking deep breaths to try to avoid exploding in front of everyone. I heard footsteps behind me. In seconds, my wife was there, with an irritated look, as if I were the problem in this situation. "Why did you leave like that?" "Everyone's looking," she said, accusingly. "Why did I leave?" "Seriously, you're asking me that? Is your priority now not the fact that your friend ruined our wedding, which you allowed to happen, even after I said no?" I shouted. She started babbling something about not being able to say no to Julia, about how it was her dream. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And what about my dream? Our dream? Doesn't that matter to you? You let the day that was supposed to be ours turn into a pathetic spectacle for your friend. Congratulations. You managed to ruin everything." She tried to defend herself, saying she thought I was overreacting, that it was just a proposal. But I couldn't hear anymore. Every word she said only made me realize how wrong I had been to think she respected me and put our relationship above her friend's childish whims. I knew that this was the beginning of the end. I went back inside, just to grab my things and leave that nightmare. Meanwhile, Julia was already being congratulated by some guests, as if she had done something grand. My wife didn't even try to stop me when I left. No one seemed to notice or care. The following days were chaotic. My wife tried to justify her actions several times, saying that Julia was sorry and that it had all been a misunderstanding. I, on the other hand, began to see everything clearly. Julia wasn't the real problem. The problem was my wife, who never had the courage to stand up for herself or prioritize me. I knew I couldn't continue with someone like that. I asked for a divorce. She was shocked, tried to cry, beg, but I had already made up my mind. It wasn't just about the marriage, it was about everything. It was about every time she put others above me, every time she let Julia interfere in our life. There was no going back. But I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted her to understand the weight of her choices. While we were organizing the details of the divorce, I made sure to be firm and told all our friends and family exactly why we were separating. I detailed everything that had happened at the wedding, leaving nothing out. The image she had so carefully built began to crumble. Julia didn't escape either. I made sure to expose her actions on social media, telling how she had stolen the spotlight from our wedding for her own benefit. People took my side. Julia lost many friends and even the respect of some relatives. I later found out that her boyfriend, whom she had proposed to, broke up with her shortly afterward, saying he didn't want to be with someone as selfish as my ex-wife. She had to deal with the consequences of her choices. Without my presence, without the support I always gave her, she finally realized what she had lost. But for me, it was too late. I moved on, free from that mess, with the certainty that I would never let anyone disrespect me like that again. What haunts me the most isn't what happened on the wedding day, but what it symbolized. The wedding should have been a milestone, the beginning of a life where two become one, building something bigger together. But in that moment, I realized that this ideal was never a reality for us. I was never a priority for her. That became painfully clear on the one day that should have been exclusively about us. Julia, with her arrogance and selfishness, took the microphone and the stage. But the one who made space for her was my ex-wife. Not only did she allow this to happen, but she tried to convince me that I was overreacting, that it was just a small detail, a special moment for someone else, as if our day could be divided, as if the brilliance of the wedding wasn't something unique and sacred for us both. It was the ultimate lack of consideration and, honestly, a reflection of our entire relationship. I realized something that should have been obvious a long time ago. I wasn't a priority to her. Julia had always, in some way, been more important. When she canceled plans because of Julia, when she let Julia interfere in important moments, I was always second. I told myself these were small things, that in a relationship, you have to make concessions, that friendship is important, but there's a line between conceding out of love and becoming a supporting character in your own story. On the wedding day, I realized that to her, I was just that, a supporting character in what should have been our celebration. The irony is that Julia didn't even stay with the guy she knelt down to propose to on my big day. It didn't take long for him to realize who she really was and break up with her. This only made it even more absurd that my ex-wife risked what we had for someone who clearly didn't understand the meaning of respect. She threw away what should have been the beginning of our life together for a proposal that went nowhere. My ex-wife, of course, continued to think I was overreacting. Throughout the divorce process, she accused me of being selfish, of not understanding the importance of friendships, of creating a storm in a teacup. But the truth was that it wasn't just about Julia, and she knew that. I made it clear that the problem was bigger. It wasn't just about that specific moment, it was about the pattern that it represented. On our wedding day, I shouldn't have had to compete for attention with anyone. The focus should have been on us, on our love, on our union. And she couldn't understand that. I tried to explain it to her, but the words started to feel empty. Why should I insist that someone understand something so simple when they couldn't see that marriage was about the two of us? That on that day we should have been the center of attention. So, She would never understand what it means to be truly committed to someone. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life being the last option, living in the shadow of her priorities. Today, looking back, I see how liberated I became when I made the decision to leave that relationship. The marriage wasn't ruined just by Julia, but by my ex-wife's inability to stand up for herself, to prioritize me, to prioritize us. She always thought she was doing the best she could, but the truth is she chose not to put me first. I decided that if I'm not a priority to someone, I'd rather be alone. I have no regrets. Some people might think it was an overreaction, but I know what I don't want. I won't accept being just a spectator in my own life, especially on my wedding day. That day should have been about us, and she chose to share the stage. That told me everything I needed to know. My ex-wife still tries to justify herself to others, saying I was selfish and couldn't see her side. But anyone who truly understands what a relationship means knows that, on that day, there was no other side. It was about us, or it was nothing. She chose nothing by allowing Julia to steal our moment. As for me, I moved on. I learned that respect and priority are essential in any relationship. Love isn't enough if there is no balance, if one person always has to sacrifice what matters, while the other doesn't lift a finger. Now, I'd rather be alone but at peace than in a relationship where my value is constantly diminished. My marriage was a failure, but it taught me something valuable. Never accept less than I deserve. If I ever marry again, it will be with someone who understands that, on that day and on every other, we will both be each other's priority, because without that, no union is worth it. After everything that happened, life moved on, but not without leaving marks on all of us. Each one of us reaped what we sowed that fateful day and in the months that followed. Me, my ex-wife, Julia, and even her ex-boyfriend faced the consequences of our actions, choices, and values, or the lack thereof. My ex-wife, for instance, tried for a long time to convince herself and others that I was the villain of the story. She kept telling everyone that I had overreacted, that I was selfish and unable to understand the importance of friendships like hers with Julia. Some believed her, of course, but many, after hearing the details of what happened at the wedding, couldn't defend her position. She ended up isolating herself because those who had once admired us as a couple began questioning her ability to value the people around her. Worse still, she slowly began to realize the impact of her choices. Without the constant support I offered, without someone always by her side, she realized that Julia, whom she had prioritized so many times, didn't return the favor. After Julia's boyfriend broke up with her, Julia's focus shifted, and my ex-wife began to feel what it means to be the second option. When she needed advice, help, or just company, Julia was busy. Then the truth became clear to her. Julia wasn't a friend. She was someone who used others for her own benefit. This realization, though bitter, was the price she had to pay for putting me second so many times. And Julia, well, Julia reaped exactly what she sowed. Her boyfriend left her shortly after the pathetic scene at my wedding. He made it clear that he didn't want to be with someone so self-centered, so oblivious to the impact of her actions on others. Julia's fall was even quicker than I expected. Many people took my side after I exposed what had happened, and she lost the respect of friends and even some family members. Her reputation, which had been built on false charm and subtle manipulation, fell apart. She tried to return to the social circle we shared, but no one wanted to be associated with the person who had ruined a marriage out of pure selfishness. Her ex-boyfriend, on the other hand, moved on admirably. I found out through mutual friends that he found someone who truly respects and values him. He married a few years later to a discreet and kind woman who, ironically, was described as the opposite of Julia. I was happy for him because, unlike Julia, he never seemed to be part of the manipulation or drama she caused. He was just as much a victim as I was, and seeing that he found happiness was a small comfort amidst the chaos. As for me, I also moved on, but in a way I hadn't imagined. After the divorce, I focused on myself and what really mattered. I started rediscovering hobbies I had abandoned, reconnected with friends, and slowly built a life that was exclusively mine. At first, it was difficult to deal with the disappointment, with the feeling of having invested so much in someone who didn't value me. But over time, that bitterness gave way to gratitude for freeing myself from something that would never make me happy in the long run. Professionally, I achieved more than I could have imagined. Without the drama and distractions that my ex-wife and Julia brought into my life, I was able to fully dedicate myself to my career. In just a few years, I earned promotions and recognition. Today, I look back and realize that what happened at that wedding wasn't an end, but the beginning of a new phase. A phase where I am the priority in my own life. As for love, I've decided to be more discerning. I'm in no rush, but I know that if I marry again, it will be with someone who respects me, who values me, who understands the meaning of a true partnership. Someone who, on the day of our wedding, will be by my side, body and soul, knowing that that moment is about the two of us and no one else. Ultimately, we all went our separate ways, but each of us carrying the lessons of what happened. My ex-wife lost not just the marriage, but also the opportunity to grow by my side. Julia lost her reputation and friendships she claimed to value. Julia's ex-boyfriend found peace and happiness with someone who truly deserves him. And me. I gained something invaluable. The clarity to know who I am, what I deserve, and the courage to never accept anything less than that.